Welcome back, guys, to my YouTube channel. Now today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite movies of all time, and that is Prisoners. Prisoners is directed by Denis Villeneuve. It came out in 2013. He had another movie that came out that year as well called Enemy, and I think they're both great, but my favorite and one of my favorite movies of all time is Prisoners. Denis Villeneuve is already a well-acclaimed director. His latest film, Dune, is also one of my favorites, definitely one of the best sci-fi epics that have come out in the past couple of years. I have to wait until March next year for Dune Part 2, which kind of sucks because I really wanted to see it this year. Denis Villeneuve has worked on some of my favorite films to come out in the past decade, from Blade Runner 2049, Sicario, Incendie, Prisoners of course, Enemy, and also Arrival. So in this case, I'm going to be talking about Prisoners, one of his best films, and I think his best film that's come out so far in terms of directing and storytelling, one of the best showcases from him, along with working with Roger Deakins, I think the best cinematographer of all time. From Blade Runner 2049 to Prisoners and Sicario, their collaboration has been one of the best in the past decade. Roger Deakins' lighting style is being naturalistic and at times bringing in the darker tones of the silhouettes that he does, and also low-key lighting, since this is a thriller, brings out such great detail and depth to the story. There are so many great scenes in this movie, but today I want to talk about one of the best opening scenes, and the opening sequence in general. It introduces subtle themes and subtle images of what the movie is going to be about. From Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman, the two co-stars, are some of the best acting in the past decade, and I still think they should have both been nominated for Best Actor. With the great cast of characters and the great actors involved in this film, it was bound to at least have more nominations in my opinion, and it stands as well as having some of the best performances in the past decade. When it comes to the opening scene of the movie, there are so many plot themes that I want to talk about in just the first 2 minutes of this movie. The significant detail of the opening scene is obviously the symbol of the deer. A shot of a deer just grazing, and then in the wintertime, and then we're getting a slow pull-out of the shot. We're getting a slow pull-out shot. By this subtle movement alone, it shows that we're going to be revealing something to the audience. And we see that there are two hunters about to shoot down this deer. And it's obviously supposed to be a symbol of how the deer is meant to be a symbol of prey, and these two now are the predators. And such a slow shot, but I constantly love the use of the push-in, the slow push-in and the pull-out that Denis decided to use along with Roger Deakins. The slow movement kind of brings about the sense of tension and suspense that's coming. And in terms of the opening scene, we're seeing that because once we stop in terms of the camera movement, we hear the gunshot and the prayer is over, and then we hear the death of the deer. And then the music comes to kick in at the end. The next point I want to talk about is the theme that constantly is shown in the movie, and that is of religion. Specifically, obviously, Christianity in this movie is shown in the opening sequence because we hear the prayer of the Hail Mary coming from Keller Dover, Hugh Jackman's character. We see it shown in the car with the crosses hanging. We see it in Detective Loki's hand with the tattoo of a cross as well. I think the town itself and how religious the community is meant to be definitely an element in this thriller. But also I think it just comes from wanting to have this sense of faith that everything is going to be okay when it comes to saving the two little girls. Specifically Keller Dover, we're starting to see how his moral side is starting to lean back and forth from his religion, and kind of how his moral ambiguity is starting to come into question now. In terms of color throughout this movie, I think that the hunter jackets are probably one of the brightest things shown in this movie, considering that the rest of the movie is more naturalistic and shot. The colors throughout the movie are kind of more dull and are more like neutral colors compared to this hunting jacket that both of them are wearing. Just kind of bringing in a little note back from Zodiac, if you guys haven't seen my analysis on that scene in Zodiac, but in this case for Prisoners, I kind of just wanted to talk about the most dangerous game. The game is about how humanity is the most dangerous predator of all, and in this movie we're going to see why, and also it also highlights how humanity can become the lowest of the low in certain situations. It's one of the best movies that showcases moral ambiguity in terms of character work. It takes these morally just characters in the beginning of the movie and kind of just normal, your everyday type of people, and kind of shows how under the darkest pressures some of them can even become corruptible at least in the eye of the law, when it comes to what happens with the kidnapping of the two little girls. The movie specifically is questioning to the audience, how far would you go to save your kids, your family members from any potential harm, and how far would you go to see the right person come to justice? After they're driving home now with Keller Dover and his son, and they're going back home, we're starting to see that Keller Dover is kind of more of a man that's just about faith, but he's also someone that likes to be prepared in certain situations. Versus You is obviously pointing towards Keller Dover's transformation throughout the movie, and kind of how he's changing along the way into kind of being a darker and even more sinister person, some might say. When he's talking about being ready, he's talking about kind of natural things that he can somewhat control in his own life, and he can somewhat be prepared for. Like he talks about like a thunderstorm or some kind of weather that can drastically change your life, and how can those things stop you in your tracks. But when it comes down to the rest of the movie, we're talking about another human being and them being involved in kind of taking your kids away, something that you don't really think about too often. Shows also how a simple mistake can lead to a bigger problem in just an instant, and how a transformation such as losing your kids can provide such a groundbreaking change in someone's character. The last thing I want to talk about in this short scene is the last shot right before we go and break into the next scene, is of the deer, and the shot through specifically the foggy and wet window. And this is a constant shot that we see in the next scene, and also the next sequence is this shot of looking through this small window. As the two kids climb up the minivan, we see this shot of the window, and this time it's from the perspective of the person inside the van. This is also meant to symbolize how the deer was the one who was hunted down, and now that the kids are being hunted down from this potential person from inside the van. After we get the van and taking its journey around the block, we're getting the next shot of one of his daughters, and his daughter Anne is now walking down the steps, and we get this shot from inside the mini truck. And again, it brings back to the opening scene from looking through the window, also looking at the deer, and in this case the prey is obviously going to be the daughter. And for the story to come, it kind of shows how these images are constantly being used throughout the movie. I think the fogginess of the window obviously comes with the idea that not everything's clear in this movie. There's always some ambiguous side to almost each character that's going on, especially Keller Dover's character. As the story progresses through the window, we also see the hanging cross, and that's another motif of religion constantly being in the movie, and this idea of faith being shown in the movie, which each of the community, with the idea of faith with the community, and especially Keller Dover's character. The next shot I want to talk about is of Terrence Howard's front yard and his family house, because we get, as the Keller Dover family is approaching the house, we get this wide open shot of the front yard. And it's also similar to, because we get the long trees and kind of this nature kind of picture, it's very similar to the opening shot of them being in the forest with the woods and the trees being so vertically aligned. This wide shot used again later in the sequence, towards the end of the sequence, as everyone is storming out of the home. The wide shot is shown again as they're now searching for Anne and the missing daughters. We now get this feeling of, it's kind of the calm before the storm as Terrence Howard plays his trumpet, and throughout the course of these shots we kind of just get the feeling that everything's gonna be okay, until we eventually see the push-in of the tree in the front yard. This is the opportunity that the hunter has taken to take on its prey, and this is kind of the signal of things that are going to shift now into a darker turn into the story. It's also supposed to be reminiscent of the opening scene of how we were pulling out to see the prey being attacked by the predator. In this case, we're being closer and we're kind of more stalking, and we're now pushing into the Dover family. The score is also starting to play once we get this shot of the push-in. This sequence is beautifully edited and shot and acted and well lit, and it's obviously so well directed and meticulously shot, because we get these small inserts and POV shots that connect so beautifully together. And it's a constant theme throughout the entire movie, kind of these points of being stalked and the religious factor, and all these different themes throughout the movie of paranoia and ambiguous characters, and the kind of the signaling of the good becoming more morally corrupt throughout the movie. So guys, that was my breakdown of the opening sequence in the Prisoners movie. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really enjoyed doing these breakdowns. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's my 5th favorite movie of all time, actually. I've seen it multiple times now. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you guys seek out the Prisoners movie as well. Drop your comments down below and let me know what you guys thought of this video, and have a good one.